And Armbruster, this is fantastic. This is the 70th anniversary of Stateline Speedway. Many years ago, we did a documentary and had a chance to interview the Squirt Johns and the Bobby Schnars.
All my heroes when I was growing up, and I just remember that we'd do all kinds of odd jobs for my dad, so he'd take us to the races on Sunday night, and our heroes were Ron Blackburn and Jay Plyler and Squirt Johns and Dick Litz and Tom Dill, and I just, growing up, it was neat to go to the races on Sundays.
Well, let's back up about growing up. Talk a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, my dad grew up in California, and he was in the Navy, and he was an apprentice at GE when they were stationed in Erie, and he met my mom, and then his whole family moved to Erie, and my mom, which is the more mechanical of the two, my dad wasn't real mechanically minded. He was an accountant, but my mom would be a hands-on type of person. Her father had a construction company in Erie, and she actually helped him quite a bit maintaining stuff. And she's a wonderful person. Both my parents were great. I loved them both.
Now, part of what drew you to Erie was your dad to Erie. Was that because of GE, the GE plant, or?
Yeah, but my dad, when he was growing up, he used to go to the, I think it was the Alameda Coliseum for the sprint car races. Ah. And my dad was the reason why we even got involved in racing. In 1958, we lived in the road type houses in Lawrence Park, which was basically a GE community. Mm-hmm. And the alleys in the back, they used to have like alley parties, and we'd get together for an alley party. And Jim Dunn lived on Priestley, and we lived on Newton, and Ted Monkern and Ted Bartlett, and they got together and wanted to build a race car. So pretty much my dad said, well, I'll finance it if you guys can build it, pretty much. And so my dad owned a car, and Jim Dunn drove it, and they were very successful. And
where were they successful at? Where were the tracks?
They raced at Cool Road and Sulphur Springs, and they raced at the Erie Academy Stadium, and I was pretty young then, so I really didn't get the gist of it, but my Aunt Sis used to take us down, and we could watch at the stadium from the Lions Transportation Building. We could look down in there, but then my Aunt Sis would have to take us home because my mom and dad didn't want us there, and she didn't want to get in trouble with them for taking us over there. But my dad really loved racing, and he was really the only reason why we got involved, because of his love of the sport. And he was a statistician, he used to keep time trials for those sprint cars in California and stuff, and it's kind of surprising. But anyway, Jim Dunn raced quite successfully. They did real well. We used to tow the car to the racetrack with our station wagon, flat towed it, and they put the bar that would hook onto the hitch, they would leave that on there when they raced. It was just they folded it up and whatever. But I guess one day at the races, Jim Dunn was actually leading a race, and he was making ground by getting through a gap between a wall and a car. And back then it was like these enduro races. They never took you off the racetrack back then. They'd go green, and it would be, if you were sitting in the middle of the racetrack, you sat there, It's kind of odd, but it was like the enduros that we had here. One lap he'd go around, he'd squeeze through there, and lap after lap he'd squeeze through there. Well, the car got nudged towards the wall, and he ended up going next time around. He hit the guy, and he flipped it end over end. And that was pretty much the end of my dad's tenure with racing, because Jim Dunn left him after that, and it's kind of a sour grape situation, and you know, whenever you have drive or there's a reason for you wanting to do well. Yep. I always wanted to prove to my dad that there was an Armbruster that can win races, you know, and it always bothered me that he didn't take a hold of that and say, okay, I'm going to take and drive the car, or I'll fix the car, so on and so forth. He just didn't have that capability. And I wanted to prove to him that we had that capability, and it was just a wonderful family sport because it kept us all together for a long, long time. And we valued racing as a way for us to have, you know, togetherness, you know, because it brought us all together. You know, my brothers and...
Who were your brothers? Let's name names.
My brother Jack, who's the oldest of us, he's responsible for keeping all the records on the team, and he was very, very methodical on everything he did. He knew every shock and spring in the car, and he was pretty much, he pretty much took care of all the notes, and we had a really good, I don't know, setup for knowing what the car did or didn't do that night, and he would really take it, you know, give us an advantage in that area because a lot of teams didn't do that, but we did. And Jack would know everything about what would happen in the car, and one night I overruled him on a setup, and he got mad and he left, and he said, "Well, you're gonna go, you know, you're gonna do shit, you know," just like that. And he said, "I'm going home." So anyway, we ran that feature. We ended up winning the feature that night, but the car wasn't any good. So anyway, we get home and he's sitting on the cooler drinking a beer. He said, "Well, how'd you do with that stupid setup?" And I said, "Well, we won. And but the car wasn't any good." He said, "Oh, you're just lucky you can drive." That's what he told me. But that's my older brother, Jack. And then, and Jack was very opinionated. You know, he was somewhat tough to get along with sometimes. You know, as a brother even, you know, he would be. And then there was my brother Jim, which pretty much organized the whole team. My mom, my dad, my brother Jim would make sure all the finances were in order, and you know, he did everything. He did the tires, he'd do our PR work. He'd pretty much hold the whole team together. And then, and I can't understate that because, you know, he knows pretty much everything about. And then he actually went to work for Cowens and worked for Todd Andrews and John Mason for a while, and he really enjoyed that part of it. And he probably pretty much more advanced than what we wanted to do, that's for sure. I didn't really like to travel at all. I really particularly just didn't want to go, you know. And but Jim was more of a traveling type of guy, and he enjoyed that, and that was good. Then there was my brother Bob. He wasn't with us all the time, but when we needed his help, he would be there, and he was more mechanical. My brother Bob and I were the mechanical part of the family, and Jim and Jack were more of the clerical type of the family. And well, Jim also worked at the Continental News Herald, and he did a lot of sports writing, and he worked for a dirt late model magazine, and you know, he'd done a lot of things, and he has a lot of similarities to Randy Anderson. When I think about the two of them, they have a lot in common, and they do good at what they do, and they're both very, very talented people.
So at what point did Dan Armbruster say, all right, maybe we could put a car together and let's try to race?
Well, we were running semi-lates, and actually the semi-late class we were running in were very good. I mean, we ran Sharon and Raceway 7 primarily. And we raced against guys like Tom Niles and Dan Nick and Tom Bonanno and Bill Gabrielson, and a lot of these guys are from Ohio. And the Ohio cars were a little bit different than the PA cars. Dan Westcott was another one that was really good. And quite honestly, I think the talent in that class at that time was as good or better than the late model class in my book. You know, you also had like Tom Jarrett, which in my book was the best. And I used to follow him quite a bit. But the semi-late class back then was very competitive. But it seemed like when we moved to late models, that was the class that I probably was the best at. And I'm not really sure why, but we were a lot better in a late model than we were in anything else. I mean, our win percentage was pretty good, and yeah.
Did you start, do you remember the class, and about what year did you start racing?
Ooh.
Early mid-70s?
Well, I wanted to race ever since I was in high school. And I remember my basketball coach used to yell at me because I'd come to basketball practice with dirt underneath my fingernails. And he said, "Come on, Dan, you got all your life to do that car stuff. Let's play basketball." And he also would take and yell at me for going up to the ice skating rink because we had an ice skating rink right up the road. And we'd like to go up there and ice skate for, you know, all day. My mom would lose track of us and she'd wonder if we were still alive. But my basketball coach would come over and say, "Hey, do you want to play basketball?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, get rid of them damn skates." I said, "Okay, fine, whatever." But that was pretty much that.
So you started off, I'm thinking probably in the mid-70s. Was there a class like a hooligans or cadets? Was that?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like in high school, our first race car was a 1957 Chevy. And I remember that we didn't have tools or anything. My next door neighbor was kind of a mentor towards me, Dick Mosier. He would always come over and help me do stuff. And well, we cut the floorboards out of the back of the 57 with a hatchet. But he also told me how to raise the amperage on a stick welder when you could actually use it to notch out pipe. And then I built that first car in my mom and dad's garage. And if I think back to it now, the things they allowed me to do was just amazing, because I just feel so bad about what we did of having all the cars and all stuff around. But Mr. Moser was very important in my early days of just being able to get a car together. And you know, we started, well, I actually got a scholarship to Edinburgh for football, and when I went to Edinburgh, all I wanted to do was race. And I probably should have had a different mindset, because it didn't help me much going forward. I just wanted to race cars. And well, we started racing there, and I raced for quite a bit and didn't have no success. I mean, we blew a lot of motors, and we learned the hard way. But the thing about it is that we learned by having a lot of problems. And I never had anybody that knew a lot about racing to come and help me, except for like one of my best friends I graduated from high school with, Duke Wilson. Him and I pretty much were the ones that wanted to get stuff done and go racing, along with the help of Jim. And we actually had a great time doing it, but we never had much success. We learned the hard way. But Duke's been with us all through my racing career. You know, he's been the guy that did the engines and the tune-ups and stuff. And then we also had Jim Cunningham who'd come do our carburetors. And we just had a lot of talented people help us along the way. But I never really had that one guy that showed me how to do stuff. I pretty much learned everything me and Duke pretty much learned stuff on our own, you know, trial and error.
What racetracks did you start off at?
Well, I started off at Erie's and Stateline. And I remember at Stateline, the first night out, in the 57 Chevy, they put me in the third heat, and that was a fast heat. And I don't know why they would do that, but they did. But anyway, I come off the corner and I hit the wall, and I bent tie rod in. And we were so naive and stupid back then. And we flat towed the car, and then we were towing it home, and we blew out the front tires from the tow being out. And Gary Hammerman was behind there, and he stopped and he gave us a tire to put on it to get it home. But that's when I met Gary Hammerman, and Gary was he was very helped us. We used to keep our limited late model at his dad's house on Arbuckle Road, and he was me, Gary, and Duke and Jim. We just built the semi late there, and he was instrumental in a lot of what we did back then. And I don't know, we never really had a lot of success until we got into the late model class.
Who financed all this? I mean, there's some economics here. When you trial and error and you're blowing motors.
That's probably a better question for Jim, because Jim always found out the way to get the money together. He was always responsible for that.
You have sponsors and stuff like that?
Yeah, we had probably some of the sponsors we had, like East Bay Lanes, like Nancy and George Warren, and Bob and Audrey Lytle. They were very helpful to us back in the day, and also like Bill Roberts. I raced for Bill Roberts for I don't know how many years, but Bill always, wanted. He always worked hard at trying to make us get good, and he did. He gave us everything we needed, but I pretty much cut all. We did everything through Armbruster Racing. That's where I learned, and a lot of our success was with Armbruster Racing. But then Bill's, we had success with Bill too, so it was good. It was Bill and Jody were wonderful to race with.
So you did decide at some point to go to late model, super late models, and was that a hard decision, or was that just a natural evolution?
I don't know. It wasn't a hard decision. It just seemed like everybody back then at that time were running Hoover cars, and then we were running cantilever cars and all kinds of stuff. I mean, we were throwing everything at it. Remember the cantilever cars? And but my first late model was a Hoover car, and we did build a late model that was all fabricated ourselves, and we finished third in points with it, believe it or not, the year we raced it at Sharon. Because pretty much Sharon was the only place we'd go to, and we'd go to Raceway 7 too, but I just remember racing Sharon that year. But we didn't race full time all the time. We just picked and choose, I know that we won some point championship at Stateline, but we never really put our heart into it, what I mean? As far as, we probably could have, probably tried to win more championships, but it wasn't that important to us.
Well, I'm talking about winning a championship, and part of why you're here today is we're going through and interviewing those who were champions at Stateline who during this 70th anniversary cycle, and you were your first time as a champion. By the way, other than there's Dick Barton, and then there are two guys at three-time champions, a guy named Squirt Johns, you may have heard that, and a guy named Dan Armbruster. Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool company.
Yes, it is. I'm very, very proud of that.
So, in 1992, you were the point champion, and there were some drivers at that time, and maybe you can have some memories of any of these guys, but I'll just throw them out. Rod Malloy, Barton we mentioned, Brian Ruhlman, Skip Furlow, Craig Briggs, Chuck Frank, Scott Gerdick. I mean, this is quite a who's who, and you were the champion that year.
Yeah, well, I was surprised. I didn't even remember actually that we won a circuit championship. Randy told me that, and I don't really even. That's the whole thing, When I raced, I really didn't think a lot about that stuff. I had two golden rules in racing. Number one, don't wreck nobody. Otherwise, if your car's not capable of winning that night, and if somebody else is faster, let them go, for crying out loud. Do your work in the garage and get the car faster. And number two was, if you have a car capable of winning, win. Because you owe it to your fans, your crew, your sponsors, yourself. Just but try to do it in a respectable way. And luckily we had cars that were fast, and the nights the cars were fast, it's real easy to win a race. I mean, the car was just so good, and But there's a lot of stories I have about that too. But
well, let's go ahead. The statute of limitations is run, so you talk about how a car gets fast, and obviously sometimes there's tricks of the trade or whatever. Did you have some of those?
Yeah, we did a lot of research. We tried a lot of different things. When the carbon fiber brake stuff was coming in, we tried to go with a titanium ceramic coated brake that we thought would work, and it worked fine for 25 lappers, but anything longer than that, you might as well forget about it. We went to Hagerstown one time. We were actually running pretty good, and then I lost brakes on like the 50th lap. I know it was a 100 lapper, but we come in the pits, and Duke said, "Man, I can't do nothing." I had no brakes, and here the rotors were all doilied. I mean, they just disintegrated. I did end up running that race, and I ran the whole last half of that race with no brakes, and it was an experience, and it was fun, but I wouldn't want to do it again. That's for sure.
Were there other tricks of the trade?
Yeah, we ran cambered rears. I talked a lot about when I got that wheel sponsorship that Randy helped me get, actually. I talked a lot with Billy Decker, and Billy Decker was very much into everything that was the newest and latest stuff, because he was probably the primo guy at the time in New York Modifieds. And I'd call him on a weekly basis, and we'd chew fat, and I could tell him some things that helped him, and he would tell him some things that helped me, and a lot of that was like the cambered rears, which is, a lot of people didn't do it much back then, but we did, and just a couple things, we just tried a lot of the latest stuff in technology, and we really did do quite a bit of that. Now the engines, our first engine was a Dream that we got from John and Dave Dream, and that was our first decent engine. And then, well, actually, we never really bought too many engines. Now, Craig Michaels did a lot of stuff for us, and Craig was primo at the time in my book. I couldn't understand why more people didn't go with Craig, because I thought the performance of the engines were great, and also if I had some thoughts that I could shoot at Craig, he would suggest doing some different things, and we usually did that stuff, and it was pretty good. I mean, Craig was right on top of his game.
Was Craig in Findlay Lake? Was that his career?
Craig is in Clymer.
Clymer.
Yeah.
When you were racing during late model racing, and certainly at the high point, was there an individual that you didn't really want behind you? You're looking in your rearview mirror in your last lap, and you say, "Oh no." Was there? I mean, let me give you a context. We interviewed all those guys in the '60s and '70s, and we all, whether it was Ronnie Black or Squirt Johns, you name it, who was the guy you least didn't
You're trying to dig up dirt, aren't you?
Well,
I had issues with Bruce Hodusky, and it seemed like it would never go away. I wouldn't run King of the Hill because I didn't want that one-on-one thing, that controversial crap that he was trying to throw into the racing community. Franny was pretty much like Donald Trump of the day, You know, there he used to do things that couldn't be done, but he did it anyway. And he really helped our sport. And I know with Ron Nielsen, of course, and I somewhat feel bad because I really encouraged Ron to buy Raceway 7, and I knew Cliff Brown real well. And I kind of got them two together, and Ron was very much interested, so he ended up buying Raceway 7. And I'm not saying I was largely responsible, but I kind of connected them two together to get that done. And but Franny was a rare breed. I mean, he was so much different than everybody else. It was his way or the highway, and we went to the highway quite a bit. I got some stories about that. I remember one night that me and Dick were running a 60 lapper at Stateline, and I pretty much was leading the race pretty much the whole time, and I really wasn't never pushing the car. You know, we got into traffic, and Dick got by me, and I had maybe 1 or 2 laps left to go, and I kind of tapped Dick, and I got by him on the outside, and I ended up winning the race that night. And Franny come over to the car, and he goes, "Hey, Dan, come here." And I said, "Yeah." Franny said, "Jump in here." I said, so I jump in there in his truck, and we go over to Dick, and he told Dick to come over here, and he said, "You know something, Dick, I'm glad Dan passed you for that feature that night." And I said, "Come on, Franny, why would you do that?" You know? But he promoted controversy, and he wanted to make it to be a championship wrestling type of thing or something. You know, he's just he spearheaded controversy, and I've got a lot of controversy too. Believe me, I got a lot of stories about Franny. Some good, most, some bad, some good. But Franny was a good friend of mine, and I admired him for what he did for local racing, because he really got our purses up quite a bit, because we raced for good purses back then. And then even Ron, with Ron Nielsen at Raceway 7, the two of them were kind of battling back and forth and see who could pay more. And we were getting $2,200 to win a feature. And that's unheard of, because I talked to some of my friends down south that I raced online with, and their payouts down there were $800 to win. And the reason why I'd never raced Lernerville is because their payout was terrible. We went there one time and finished second, and I got $300. And it was like, and we probably, wasted $300 worth of tires, so it just wasn't worth going to Lernerville. And I couldn't really understand why anybody would go there on a weekly basis when they ran 3 major classes. They had sprint cars, modifieds, and late models. And it's very hard to pay the purses with 3 classes like that. And I know that my brother Jim worked with Dick McLaughlin when they had Raceway 7, and Kathy would do a lot of the book work for Dick. And my family was involved with Raceway 7 quite a bit. And we kind of knew the in and outs of it all, and it would be tough to make ends meet running 3 major divisions. And well, I got stories there too about when they run what you brung races at Raceway 7, and me and Jim would go up to Ransomville, and we talked to a bunch of the modified drivers to see if they'd come up for it. Well, they come up, and a lot of the dirt boys come up, didn't they, Jim? And we had it was great. I mean, watching those races were something special. I had Ray Godsey and Larry Moore were running late models, and then you'd have Brett Hearn and I don't know who, Mimi DeSantis and Gary Yule, and there were a lot of really good New York modified boys that come up, and it really opened my eyes on how they ran that racetrack and how good they were, because they were especially good. All of them were really good. And Kenny Brightbill won one of them. And but the history of that is with my family, with Jim being a PR man at Raceway 7 at the time, opened my eyes on probably the professional part of the sport. And I think dirt track racing is really underrated. Now it's just coming into prominence now with the TV and just like how Max Blair is doing on a national basis, you know, he's doing great. And Dave S. Jr., I would consider probably being one of the most talented drivers that I've ever seen. And we're very fortunate to have Max and Dave representing our area pretty much anywhere they go.
Sure.
You know, I was kind of surprised that Max has had like 5 races in a row where he finished in the top 5 against those guys. It's like, wow, what a major accomplishment. Because he's running against the best there is every week.
Right.
And I know Robbie was very good at what he did, and Max is especially good, for sure.
We interviewed Fran Siemens for our documentary, and that was a delight. You never knew where he was coming from. He, you know, bigger, literally physically.
Now, who is that?
Fran Siemens.
Oh, yeah.
You're bigger than life.
Yeah, he sits there
Precisely.
like that with his hat. Yeah. You know.
They had the black hat, and yes, that was it.
Yeah, I met Franny in the 70s, and when he had his junkyard down there, and Lynn and Fran were very, very good people. They were very, very cordial to you when you come to the yard. They give you just about everything for nothing. And then I could see through the years, you can see him harden and get weathered, and you can see where he's changing as time went on. And he would actually get to the point where he'd be sometimes pretty damn nasty, you know. But he, in the early parts, he was always very, very nice, and we were really good friends. We were friendship first, racing was second, but yeah.
During that time, there was that your way or the highway, and I know we've interviewed Dick Barton. You know, he went through that also. There were periods where he just said, "Hasta la vista." Your idea, was it hard to just decide where you're going to go on a weekly basis? You know, you had choices. You had choices for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Well, it's funny because we ran a 100-lapper Stateline, and I remember we used to run carbon fiber wheels. And Skip Furlow had an issue, and they double hooked him off the racetrack. And about 10 laps later, we had the same issue. And we didn't get double hooked off the racetrack.
What's the term for the camera? What's double hooked off the racetrack?
Well, double hook is when it takes 2 wreckers to get your car off the racetrack.
Okay. Thank you.
And my car needed double hook. And Franny just said, just drag the sucker through the infield. And it's like, I got pissed, and I went up to Harold Lobb and said, you know, you freaking dropped this thing because he's dragging it on our hubs and stuff. And it was money. We got money in that car, you know. So Franny told Harold, just pull the thing in the infield and he can pick it up after the races are over. And that's what happened. And my brother Jim got mad about that and said, well, we ain't gonna go back, period. So we went and we started running stars and stuff, and we went traveling for a year or 2. Then Franny calls me on the phone about 2 years later and wants to know what it's going to take to get us back. I said, I don't know. You got to talk to Jim. Jim's the one. So Jim talked to Franny, and he talked back to me, and Jim wanted to know what I wanted to do, and I said, I want to go take his money. I want anything I can do to take Franny's money. And, you know, like I say, when you have, you know, it's no different than Tom Brady getting drafted in the 6th round, and he's probably the best quarterback ever. You have that drive that makes you want to do so much better, you know. And I know that when I raced, I would always make myself the best I could be. I'd always take a nap, I'd take care of myself, and make sure that I was primo for that night of racing. And I don't know, it's just Franny was a real class act in one way, but you didn't ever want to get him mad because he would definitely get even with you. And like I said, we traveled stars, and so anyway, Jim worked out something with Franny, and we ended up going back, and But I would never want to race Eries. Franny would always yell at me for not racing Eries. Why don't you race Eries? And I said, well, if you take care of your racetrack like I take care of my race car, then I'd probably show up, and it's just the way it is. And he never really did anything to Eries. He just let it be, and I was never happy with going there. I hated Eries, and it's just the way it is. Stateline was a beautiful racetrack in 2000, 2001. You know what I mean? And when they put that new clay on it was beautiful. But I could just say that Franny said that flat tires were part of racing when he'd leave parts out on the racetrack. And we'd see him and he said, well, flat tires are part of racing. And I said, well, that's not the way we look at it, So we had a lot of disagreements, and yeah, but anyway, we went back, and I think Jim worked something out with him, and we decided we'd start racing there again, and quite honestly, we did take his money, and I was real happy to race there, and we're pretty successful.
Well, you were track champions, and I think it was 2002 and 3, so you did get his money, and you got the recognition as well.
Right. Well, Armbruster Racing, we won the Nightmare race, and I remember that the week before we had a qualifier that I think paid $3,000 to win, and it was I think a 40 lap or maybe even a 30. I can't remember, but we won that race, and that put us on the pole for the Nightmare. And Skip Farrell finished second, so I put him outside front row. So anyway, back then they had the pit road show, Mm-hmm. And me and my brother Jack were listening to the pit road show on the way to the racetrack, and everybody was picking a winner, And here I'm sitting on a pole, and nobody picked me to win. And by the time we got to the racetrack, I was pretty pissed off about it all. And it's just the way it is, And I know preparing for that racetrack, for that race, Jim spent all the money we had. He pretty much run us into the friggin', he did what he wanted to do, and he ordered the stuff that he needed to order. And we actually raced a car we hadn't raced yet that year. And I think we got a rebuild back from Dream, and we put it in. And he went out and bought all new shocks and springs, and my dad told him, he said, boy, Jim, if we don't do well in that race, we're going to be friggin' in big trouble. Because there just wasn't a lot of funds there, And Jim goes to Dad, we're going to win that race, We're going to win that race. And Dad said, I don't know how you can say that, that's whatever. And my mom goes to Dad, he goes, come on, John, let the boys do what they do good, whatever. It's just that my dad was always real skeptical. He's a realist, and it was tough for him to see that we could be good, and but he was very supportive, my dad was the greatest, I can honestly say I've never once ever had an argument with my dad. He'd be mad at my temper and high school sports and stuff, because I had a temper. And he said, boy, it just makes you look bad. But I had a high school basketball coach that really helped me quite a bit on that. And he would actually pull me out of a game and said, son, you got to control your temper. He said, no, when you cool off and you're ready to go back in, you let me know, and I'll put you back in the game. And I said, okay, coach, just like that. So I'm ready to go back in. No, you're not. You sit down and cool off a little bit. But, that happened on several occasions. And but basketball brings out, it really magnifies what your attitude is and so on and so forth. We're racing. You're behind a helmet. And when you put that helmet on, I just took and I could really concentrate. And it was just like, feeling every corner of the car, and basically I had to have every rivet in the right spot. If it didn't, it would drive me nuts. And my body man, Neil Wojnarowski, always said, oh, you're too particular about stuff. I said, well, I want it to be perfect. I got to have it perfect, and it's just the way that we rolled. And just like, that's the way we kept our cars. We really, and we never went to the racetrack without weighing the car. We always set the car up before we raced it. I hear some of these guys, oh yeah, I took it to Toby's a month ago. And I said, well, no wonder you're not handling good because you don't do it all the time, But I learned a lot from Rocket. We had one set of tires for setting up the car. We would take and drain the tank, so we had 10 gallons of fuel in every time. We had just the set-up tires that we had just for scaling the car. There was a lot of things that Mark Richards taught us that we were aware of, and it really helped as far as our performance goes. We were really consistent, and but I always had a lot of help on the side, like Kenny Dias from Dias Spring would help us quite a bit. He would. We actually built team cars there when we were running semi-lates. I was number 61 and he was number 62, and Kenny's a real good friend of mine, and I always appreciated all the help he gave me, graduating through, and Kenny did run late models for us. He could have been really good, but his wife was just dead set against it. She didn't really like me hanging out with him because I'd get him into these, but Kenny had other things. He liked scuba diving and doing other things, so he kind of went his way. And because he grew up in my neighborhood, he was part of the kids that were in our neighborhood, and but he helped me a lot through my racing career.
Dan, you left us hanging. You left us hanging about the nightmare race.
Yeah, well,
the listeners here are saying, "Come on, we gotta figure out what happened."
Well, anyway, me and Jack were on the way to races. Nobody picked me to win, so I was kind of mad when I got there, and I kind of had an attitude. And it just made me concentrate even more. And I know Jim and Skip were talking about what kind of tire compounds they were going to run, and Jim pretty much determined what we were going to run. Because Jim really did a lot with tires. He was on top of the game, and we ran a D3B, which was a really hard tire, diameter about a 90. And actually, my brother Jack still has that tire. He has it. We made a table out of it. But anyway, Jim and Skip talked before the race started. Said, well, we're going to be awful hard, so we're going to be skating around. And sure enough, we were skating around for the first 10 or 15 laps, and I maintained the lead. And then all of a sudden, the car just started working really good. And it was a wonderful car to drive. It was just one of those things that you hit or you miss. Well, we just happened to hit that night, and I think any driver will tell you that when they have a really good car, it's easy. It really is easy when the car is good. But when it's bad, it creates a lot of difficulties, and you just got to know the difference between the two and then attack it a different way. You can adjust only so much in the car. You can adjust your driving style, you can adjust brakes, you can adjust this to that. I didn't have to adjust nothing that night. And I've had a lot of cars like that, which kind of brings us right back to the theory of setting the car up every night and making sure the car is good.
So you won that race?
Yeah, we led every lap. And
you made Jim happy and your dad happy because you filled the coffers?
Well, my dad was filled to death, and it was got to be the, I don't know, it's probably got the best accomplishment in my lifetime, really, just to have my mom and dad so happy, and kind of fulfilled my thoughts about proving to my dad that we could win races, and that was just something that solidified everything. And there was other races too that put us on the map too, and I think, but a couple stars victories, and we should have probably won 5 altogether, and I only won 2. I got stories about that too, but I don't want to be negative, because a lot of these could be negative stories, and I don't want to share those with you so much. I was pretty, like I say, I concentrated in everything I did back then. I think racing requires an athletic background and to be really good. Like, you know, there's a lot of guys that I raced with that I really enjoyed racing with, and Chubb and I've never had a problem. And Chris Lechner was my crew chief in 2002 and 2001, and we really won a lot of races in that span. But I remember one night in particular that me and Chubb were running 1 and 2 at Stateline, and I was actually winning the race, and I come off at turn 4, and I was on the bottom and Chubb was on the high side, and actually I probably could have squeezed him out, whatever. I didn't. And here Chubb's dad come over and said, "Why the hell didn't you put him in the wall?" You know? And I'm thinking, this is Chubb's dad telling me I should put him in the wall? And it's just like...
This is Jerry.
I just really like Jerry. Yeah, he was a good guy. And, you know, I didn't really know Chubb all that well, surprisingly. For as many times I've raced with him, I've always respected him. And I've got to admit one thing, Chubb was the reason why I flipped out of the ballpark at Race Play 7. And the story I've got to tell was that he broke a tie rod in and he was banking off the wall going down the straightaway. And I was concentrating on missing him. And then when I got to the corner, I realized, man, I'm going way too fast. And you know, it's like, expect the unexpected. Like, I couldn't believe it. It was like, I'm going way too fast. So I went off the end of the racetrack, and I think I flipped 6 or 7 different times and went through the fence out in the parking lot and ended up in the parking lot facing the racetrack right next to a yellow Corvette. And I remember seeing my brother-in-law at the time. He was working at the racetrack, and he come through the fence, and he got hung upside down on that friggin' fence of where I went through. And I remember also that when I landed on all 4 wheels. The race car was facing the racetrack, and it was real dark. And I stalled the motor out, and I hit the brakes so hard when I was going over the bank. It just, everything got real quiet, and then everything started, you know. But when I landed, the car was on fire. The gas was, the exhaust pipe was on fire, and it did go out. But I was just feeling myself to make sure I was okay. And because it was pretty traumatic. It wasn't an easy flip. It was nasty. But my brother-in-law come through the fence, and he ended up getting hurt worse than I did. But one of the paramedics who was there, my finger was dislocated. And I said, "Hey, would you mind popping that back into place for me?" "Oh, I can't. I just pull on that damn thing, will you?" And he popped it. And he come up and said something to me about 4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember where we were at. He said, "Well, I was the guy that popped your finger back out." I said, "That's great. I appreciated that." But Chubb breaking that tie rod, and it just goes to show you that in racing, there's going to be a lot of things that happen you don't expect, and you come into these different situations. And I've always felt that I was prepared to handle all those, but there's always that one time it'll bite you, you know what I mean? And that was one of them. And that was the only time I flipped a race car, really. And it's really the only time I had any bodily injury, because probably the next week after that, it felt like somebody hit me in the middle of the back with a sledgehammer. And I actually did go to the doctor and get checked out, but everything was fine. My finger was a little screwed up, but besides that, I was fine.
So I'm looking at kind of the who's who of the racing at the time. There was, I'm starting in 1990, it was Dick Barton, Dan Armbruster, Dick Barton, David Scott, Matt Urban, Rod Malloy, Dan Armbruster. Was that the competition for you, the names I've just named?
Well, Dick was always my competition. We always had, we always ran about the same, it seemed, and we were always around each other. And we did good considering we were around each other. Me and Bruce Sadusky was a little bit different. We were a little bit more, seemed like we run into each other a lot more for some reason. I don't know. Bruce is a great guy, and I mean, he most certainly is. But we had our issues when it come to being on the racetrack together. Matt Urban was always very, very good. And Dave Scott, he's a wonderful character, I mean, he's a, you talk about some of these guys you race against and stuff like Rod Malloy and all these guys are all really good guys, and it would be really stupid for me to say anything negative about any of them because I like them all, because we actually had about the same lifestyle, what I'm saying, which is working your ass off in a race car all the time and depriving your family of your presence. And my wife always held that against me. We'd go on a Thursday night and we'd go Friday, Saturday, Sunday and get home Monday morning and I'd say, hi babe, and she'd go screw yourself, whatever. That was Deb's attitude towards me racing a lot of the times because it really did take me out of a lot of family things, and it was tough sometimes with the kids and everything, and it created a little bit of animosity from Deb and just saying that I was racing on it. And that's why when I took Sundays off, it was really nice to have Sundays off because it was just nice to get away from it. Like if you race, you either jump in or you jump out. There's no in between. If you don't jump in, then you're not going to perform. The car's not going to be good. You got to jump in. You got to do full force. You got to take and spend a lot of time with it. And if you don't do it, you're not going to do well. We put the effort in. I deserved to win races because we worked on the car hard. We did the maintenance. We did all the stuff that required to run well. And I know, like Randy will tell you, it's you got to have a good crew. I had as good as crew as anybody. I had Roy Furry and Tim Furry, which was great. Duke Wilson was all-star material. I had a lot of guys, other help that I've had through the years, and it's changed quite a bit. And like Greg Grizzle and Chris Lechner. Chris Lechner was an excellent crew chief. We understood each other real well. He knew exactly what I wanted, and we used to hit it more often than not. I mean, it just takes a lot of effort and a lot of knowledge. And Chris is a pretty smart character. He's a character, but he's smart. And he's from the Chubb family, of classics. What I'm saying? Because he did pretty good at what they do. Chubb is an amazing racer. I mean, him winning the Dream or the World 100 is an accomplishment that is just through the roof in this area. And I'm so proud of him. And even though we were competitors, we never really ever had a problem with each other, and we raced against each other a lot. And I could always say that it was fun racing with him. And actually, I was proud of how he represented our area too. And he made more sacrifices than what I'd ever consider, that's for sure.
Was your car ever broken? At the end of the race, when the race officials take your car and check out the specs, and did that ever happen?
We never really had much. I remember early on, Keith Clark was the pit crew. He was the pit steward. And I know that Skip bought a car with carbon fiber rotors on it, and we weren't allowed to run them because we were supposed to be running Stars rules at the time. So I'd go up to Franny and complain. He said, well, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Skip bought that car from number 10. I can't remember, but it was a Schwartz car with carbon fiber rotors on it. And he said that Skip could run it, but, I couldn't. And I said, well, I got an issue with that. If I'm not allowed to run something that somebody else is allowed to run, then I'm not going to be happy about it. Yeah, I got stories about that too. I remember that when Craig Briggs brought that friggin' Barry Wright car in with all the wing stuff on it and the side things and stuff, we weren't supposed to be running that stuff, and then Craig come in with that car, and I told Neil, give me a tape measure. Let's go, we're going to measure everything on that car. And I want you to put everything 2 inches higher. So we come back the next week and we were 2 inches higher than Craig's on everything. And you can't tell me it doesn't make a difference. It makes a difference. And I think we won 3 of the last 4 features of the year with that car. And it's all because Craig came in with that very right car with all those frills on it. And I was destined to take, stretch the rules. If they don't go by the rule books, then there's no rules, right? I don't know. It should be fair for everybody, and it wasn't. And I was from Erie, Pennsylvania, and I wasn't really part of the clique. I mean, it's funny because I was at the Kelly Federer's house not too long ago, and I told him, yeah, you guys are all related up here. Everybody's related up here. You got the Davies, you got the Franks, you got the Briggses, you got the Sitzingers, you got the Hoffmans. I mean, they're all interwebbed through marriage, and they are. They're one huge friggin' congregation. Now you got Mike Knight, and it's just like unbelievable how everybody is related up in this area, and well, it's all good, but they never really particularly, it didn't seem like anybody really liked anybody from Erie, Pennsylvania. I had, it was me and Pat McGuire and Dick Litz, and I'm trying to think who else was from Erie. Mark Scarpino would run somewhat, and I'm not saying there was a war there, but I didn't really get any benefit from being from Erie, I'll tell you that right now.
Did Tom Dill mean anything to you?
Yeah, Tom and I go back a way long time. When 8 years old, I first met Tom Dill. I used to work at Joe Mobilia's gas station when I was a kid because I always wanted to learn and stuff. And Tom Dill kept his race car there. Joe Mobilia owned Tom Dill's car at the time, and it was Tom was a rare breed. I know he just passed not too long ago, but he was the Clint Eastwood of Erie. It's exactly the way I could describe him. When he drove his motorcycle, rode his motorcycle, he'd always do stupid stuff on it. But Cobby Collins was his crew guy at the time, and they had 2 race cars at the time. They had a 69 Dodge, well, I think it was 67 Dodge, that was basically sponsored by Meadowcroft Dodge. And then he had a 69 Camaro, which Moby built. And I helped build, I did the body work on that car and did a lot of stuff on that car. And that was my first experience with racing. And I was, and Moby really treated me well. He always bought me Tahitian treat, which was pop, and he'd always give me money so I could go over and play the pinball machine over at Mary's Dairy Bar, And he was just a good guy, and but he was a car salesman, and he was a dealer. And I've had my rounds with car dealers, and just like Dave Warren was my next door neighbor. He was in part of our crew, and he did tires with Jim, and I think he learned quite a bit from us, as far as how cars work and all that stuff. And he's very, he's been very successful, and I'm very proud of him. He was like a son to me. His family is like our family, and it's like, I have to say that the drivers for a cure helped me quite a bit. And when it comes to Deb's death, my wife just passed away in March, and Dave spearheaded that pretty much as far as and Steve Briggs and Boom. They decided they were going to give me a certain amount of money to help me with my bills, and I sure do appreciate everything they've done for me, and I wanted to note that because that's very important to me. And Dave has been wonderful, throughout it all, and yeah.
Why number 61?
Because Lyle Brown had number 61 on his sportsman car, and Richie Evans had number 61 on his car. And I remember growing up, those are my favorite cars. That car of Lyle Brown's just, for some reason, just hit a spark, and I just thought the 61 looked so good on those two cars. I said, I got to have a car with 61 on it. My first car was number 87, which was my number when I played football at Edinburgh, and I was a tight end, and I went with that. That was the reason why I had number 87. But my dad's car was number 58, and I would have always liked to have run 58 because it was my dad's car, but he was adamant about me not running that number. He said, no, you go with your own number. So that's what I did. I thought 61 always looked great on a race car.
And you had that throughout?
Huh?
You had that number throughout, right?
Yeah, on our cars, yeah. I mean, I had other cars that I drove for people, but pretty much all the time 61. I know Bill and Jody, you know, they didn't care what number I ran, but Jody wanted the car purple, and so we had it purple. We did what she wanted, and well, Bill and Jody were so supportive of me through the years, and I really got to thank them. You know, they just, you know, very good people.
Bill and Jody Roberts.
Right, Bill and Jody Roberts.
Randy Anderson, the consummate historian, gave me this on you, Dan. Raceway 7, Conneaut, Ohio, won 28 late model races and 4 track championships. Stateline, you won 33 late model races and 3 track championships. And Erie's, you won 8 late model races. That's remarkable. That's quite a resume.
Yeah, I never was one for stats. I always wanted to ask Jim how many races we won, but I don't think we never really did calculate it. That wasn't anything that was real important to me. I mean, it's important for me to win races, but it wasn't important to me to look back on it or anything until probably, I retired from racing when I was 49 years old. And I was probably in my prime, and I probably could have had another 10 years to go if I wanted to. But I wanted to do something else with my life. I didn't want to have racing all my life because it really takes too much out of you. And it took too much out of me, you know, otherwise I couldn't enjoy the things that I should be enjoying, like my family and doing other things. I've never been able to have the opportunity to do other things. Like golfing, for instance, even though I don't golf. I remember going to a racetrack and I see a golf course and the guys being out hitting the ball around, and I just think, boy, how was that? You know, I mean, I never did care for golfing, but I don't know, just racing takes a lot out of you. It really does. And if you're not willing to give that effort, then you're just not going to do well. And I know that, and I no longer wanted to give it. There was no racetracks good to race at in 2004 and 2005. The racetracks were terrible. And I'm not going to put anybody down or anything, but I have stories about that too. And then I don't really want to go there sometimes because I'm critical. I'm critical about it because I'm critical about my stuff. And I think that if you go to a racetrack and you're wasting your time 70% of the time, it really isn't worth it. You know what I mean? It creates bad vibes and the whole thing. Like Raceway 7, they changed their configuration on that racetrack, and it seemed to me that I was the only one that seemed to complain. Now, Mike Ecker comes over to me and says, will you show me where I changed it? I said, I'll go show you exactly where you changed it. And he told me that I was going to give Ron Nielsen a heart attack. And you know what I told him? I said, no, you're the reason why he's going to have a heart attack, because you're the one that changed the racetrack, and you're the one that's going to drive everybody away. Now, Raceway 7 back in the day was a beautiful racetrack. Going down the back stretch there, it was always remarkable to watch a race there because of the pure sound of the engine and the speed going down the backstretch, all that stuff went away. You know, there was no longer that fan, people really enjoyed watching races. The races weren't that good anymore. You know, they just weren't as good as what they were in the past. And I think Jim can remember some of those big block modifieds going down the backstretch. It was remarkable to see them cars do that. You know, that backstretch on Raceway 7 was a hell ride. I'm telling you, that track was fast. And they changed it considerably to slow the cars down, and I don't know, well, the clay pretty much went away, because that track was very, very tacky. We could run a 0 all year long there without hurting it. You know what I mean? It never wore tires. And the whole problem was that when you come home and you go to wash the thing off, you know, you had enough clay on the car to freaking fill 2 horseshoe pits. You know what I'm saying? I mean, really, it was, remember that, James, how we had to take and, it was tough, and it would probably cost you a lot more quarters at the car wash than what it normally did. But, and then you go to a place like Erie's, you would go to wash the car and it was all tires, and everything that was black on the car, and on the roll cage in the front, it would always come to a point and it would be all friggin' rubber, and it would beat up in water, and it was like, you know, it was dirty and filthy. And but you know, I always enjoyed, actually when Stateline, before they put clay on it, we got pretty abrasive, and it would fill a lot of dirt and tires and stuff. And after I got out of the car after the feature was over, I'd take a look at my brothers and Gary Hammerman and stuff, and one part of their face would be black and the other part of their face would be clean. And it was like, have you guys looked at yourselves in the mirror lately? Well, I'm just saying that it was really, it was something. The tracks were, like in 2004, the tracks were terrible. I ain't gonna lie. I just didn't figure it was worth me going racing anymore.
And that was when you retired, 2004?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you were racing, was that a full-time job for you, or did you have...
No, I had my own business. I had a sign shop, and
Okay.
I did things on the side to make money and stuff. I was always that way, and I still am. One thing I wanted to say is that, well, actually, I had the thought, but it seemed like it went away. But I was self-employed. I worked at Pepsi for 15 years. I worked at GE. My job at GE went away. It went to Texas. I used to coil motorized wheels, and I really enjoyed the job and made good money. But they moved everything in the motorized wheels division to Texas, and I've got to admit, I'm probably an angry American. All of this stuff in the industry in Erie, Pennsylvania has gone by the wayside. You know, we had so many good companies move out of Erie, and Erie is primarily a tourist and insurance and medical town right now, and service town. And it's just like, I'm very fortunate to have 3 daughters. 2 of them are RNs. One's a vision technician. And they all have jobs here in Erie. And I'm very fortunate to have that, because I know so many of my friends, their families all scattered all over the country. And I'm able to see my grandkids. I can go to their ball games and stuff. And I have a lot of, we have a lot of interest in sports, and it's fun going to all their events. And like I say, I had 5 grandsons in a row. I was 0 for 3. I had 3 girls. And then I had 5 grandsons in a row, and then 5 granddaughters in a row. Now, it's kind of odd how that happened, but they're all very close to me, and we see each other all the time. And just like when Deb passed, you know, there were 17 of us in a room when she died. And that just kind of shows you how much of a family we are. Yeah.
That's the ultimate legacy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, your legacy lives long, and your kids will enjoy watching this? Because they probably will learn a little bit. And is there a question I should have asked you, Dan, as we're driving up here today, and you'd say, gee, I don't know what's going to happen, but I wonder if they're going to ask this question, and I haven't.
Oh, I could say that probably the most, the best accomplishment I ever had, I think, was winning the points championship in 2002, when there was 55 late models there every week. Remember that, Randy?
At Raceway 7 you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then there was just a tremendous amount of cars, and they had 2B mains, and we never picked a good pill. Our pills were lousy. We started in the back of every heat race, and we won pretty much all of them. But my biggest accomplishment in racing is, sure, the Nightmare is wonderful, but winning the points championship that year, racing against the caliber of cars we raced against and how many cars were there, was probably the biggest feather. I think we won either 6 or 7 features there that year amongst all them cars. I really felt that was my major accomplishment in racing, and you know, and like I said, my whole reason for it is to race, just to prove to my dad that we could be successful, and I had that drive, and you know, it was all because of him, you know, and my mom, of course, but my mom was tough, you know. I mean, she was 100% behind us, where it just proving to Dad was a little bit different. It was more of a challenge.
Do you have any movies of yourself? Anybody take videos of you?
Yeah, we took videos, and I really didn't like any of them. I quite honestly, I don't watch any of them. I don't like them. We used to use them earlier in Armbruster racing to try to diagnose some of our problems. Mm-hmm. And then after I watched it, I just had a freaking sick feeling in my stomach and saying, man, it's almost like the old Peggy Lee song. Is that all there is? You know, it's like, I just didn't do me any justice to watch them, you know, because it just didn't look as good as what I thought it would be, you know. It always looked slower. And, you know, yeah, wasn't a good thing.
You've had the benefit of throughout your career of racing with and some of the best that, you know, certainly Stateline Erie's, Connie had. But were there some that you kind of became close friends with? Any?
Well, probably the closest friend I have in racing would probably be Richie Gardner. He was always a gentleman, you know. I mean, he was a good guy, clean racer. And I remember one day, one type at Erie's, we were running a feature. I think it might have even been I can't remember. It could even have been a Stateline. But we went in the first turn, and he was in front of me. Well, actually, we were running quite a few laps together, but I come in and I hit him, and I spun him out. And it's like, oh boy, you know, I spun Richie out. And I'm thinking to myself, but I didn't really feel like it was my fault. Although I was following him real close. You gotta be right behind somebody really, really close to get by him, especially some of these tight tracks. So anyway, after the race was over, Jim goes to me and said, boy, you spun Richie right out. I said, boy, Jim, I don't think that was my fault. So anyway, sure enough, here comes Richie. He's walking over, and I said, oh boy, you know, let's see what Richie had. He says, Dan, sorry, I spiked my brakes on you. And it's like, and then Jim goes to me, he says, you know something, Dan, I'm never gonna say anything about that anymore. You guys know, you know, and I know, you know, the drivers know. And I've made some mistakes, and I'm gonna be the first one to admit it. You know, there's been times it was my fault. But the thing about it is, you gotta be so close to somebody to try to get by them. If one of the two of you do something that isn't, you know, then stuff happens. But that was one particular time that I did feel bad about. Well, I always feel bad about it. You know, and one thing about Franny, you know, there was a time that me and Richie started in the front row and ended up, I think that he might have spun me or something. but they would not put me back up front. And Richie wanted them to put me back up front, but Fritz said, no, you're going to the tail. And I remember one time at Stateline, up on top of turn 2, Franny was standing there, and I was walking up to look at the racetrack, and he goes to me and he says, you know, Dan, you're so much better driver than all these guys here, you know. He said, yeah, but you're never going to be Skip Furlow. And it's like, okay, that's a wonderful thing, because it's nice to be compared to Skip Furlow. And, you know, and Dick Litz, toward the end there, just before Dick died, it was real tough because he was very close to me. And he was partly the reason why I quit racing too, but Jim's accident really sealed the deal. Because when Jim got in that motorcycle accident, there was no way we were going to race that night. Just wasn't going to happen. And I told Jim I wanted to go with him to get that motorcycle. And he told me, Dan, just let me do something on my own for a change. I said, okay, fine, you know, whatever. He didn't make it from a mile from that freaking dealership. And he ran into a wall and he compound fractured his right leg. And so I go to see him at the hospital. And the first thing he says to me is, I know you were going to say to me, don't say it. And I said, okay, I won't say it. But I don't know, it was, I wanted to mention the people that I enjoyed racing with, and it was fun to race. And if it wasn't going to be fun anymore, I didn't want to do it no more. And but there was a lot of people that meant a lot to me in racing, and they still do. And I see a lot of them. And racing has always been a positive for me, because it actually put my name on the map. I have to mention Larry Moore. Larry Moore worked with us one year, and I've got stories about Larry Moore that is just unbelievable. But our cars were the first cars that ever had the shock behind deal, and they're still using the same suspension today. Although, like, the Longhorns are doing a little bit different, and there's some things that I can noticeably see that's changed is how they're offsetting the motors to the passenger side of the car more now. They're not so much left side weight oriented. I think they try to run off the right front and to the rear. But Larry and Skip Arp developed that shock behind deal, and I even had some input into it, but Larry actually had everything made, and then we put it into our cars, and we went to Eldora with them. And I've never been to Eldora before, and Larry was running the Mustang with the Ford motor in it, and he qualified 37th.
Whatever it was.
It was like 280 cars or something. It was a ridiculous amount of cars.
He missed the pole by one spot.
Yeah. But anyway, he was running his heat, and he was coming right up and through, faster than heck, and the fuel pump quit on him. And but Larry was quite a character, and he was a fun guy to be around, and he's a really different. And we took the cars down to Rocket to test them, and me and Larry were working till like 4 o'clock in the morning on the cars to get them both prepped, because we were prepping both of them. And he went to the hotel to sleep, and Jim was supposed to pick him up and meet us down in West Virginia. And me and Bill left with a truck and trailers, and we had 2 cars in the semi. And I could sleep on the way down, so I was okay, but Larry never seemed to wake up. Jim couldn't get him awake and couldn't get him out of there. So it was like 10 o'clock that Jim finally got a hold of him, right, James? So anyway, he said, well, I'll drive. So he had a Pontiac Trans Am, and he was just going, this freaking chip, otherwise he was on the chip all the way down to West Virginia. And he would take his battery-powered shaver, and he'd be shaving the whole way down, listening to Jeff Foxworthy. And that was just his, and it was just, Jim was just beside himself the whole way down. It's like, Larry's on the mat, you know what I mean? And but anyway, it was a shame to see that Larry just passed, and there was a lot of good memories of him. And Randall Chupp is another one that I got to know pretty well, and he was a really fun guy to race with. And there's so many good people in racing, and it was actually a pleasure for me to be a part of it for the time I was in it. And well, I mean, like you had Dick Barton and Todd Andrews and Bob Close, and you can go on and on with a list. There's so many talented racers that we raced with, and like I said, they're all, I see, like even Robbie Blair, I mean, I told Jim, Robbie had come over and try to ask Jim questions and stuff. I said, Jim, don't tell Robbie nothing. And Jim goes to me, he says, well, you don't have to worry about it. Robbie can't beat us. I said, well, he's going to be beating us if you keep telling him stuff, But fortunately, I quit before he beat us too much because I know he was going to beat me, because Robbie was exceptionally sharp. And it's actually showing on the tour today that how sharp the Blairs are. And that's well grounded, they do well. And also, like Boom and Boom Briggs and the effort he puts into racing really does a lot for the area racing. I'm proud of him for doing that, and I know Steve has a lot to do with that, but I don't know them guys real well. I knew Rick very well. Rick was a really good guy, and he was there's just so many good, like Toby, and I mean, and there's just so many, and Becky, there's so many people that are racing that you just can't, And same with Randy's crew, every one of them, Warren and John Lamb. I would love to have John Lamb in my crew. And I think everybody knew that, that he was exceptional. And Dick was an exceptional driver too, so. But I think that's all I have to say about that. I don't think there's a question that you didn't, I have so much, I mean, I have so many memories. And I probably don't remember them as much as my brothers do, but I still have a million stories, that I could tell. And
well, maybe that's a segue, since your brother's here, he's in the peanut gallery.
Yeah.
And he's probably thinking, I could add this story or that story. We should have him do what you're doing right now.
That would be wonderful. And I think people would like that, because it would be like interviewing Randy Anderson. I don't know if that's such a bad idea either, but my brother Jim has a long history in racing. He has probably a longer history than me because he stayed somewhat involved in it. And I would really like to hear his thoughts on it, because he never gets the recognition he deserves. I'm saying he's done so much, even for the local racing, and just like Randy has too. Like, look at this place, this Hall of Fame here, this is unheard of. I come in here and I see, and I love baseball, basketball, football, I mean, all of it. This is really a tremendous thing. And I've never been in a place like this before. When you take a look at all the memorabilia around here and the effort people put into this, it's unbelievable.
Well, it's a real testament to Randy, there's no question. And we're not blowing up Randy with the glory gun here, because he's in the audience too.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. This has been
fantastic. Thank you.
What a great morning this has been.
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much.